features, sharp under the tanned skin, were akin to the skull Shann still half saw among the ascending pillars of fog. "Storm's over." Shann shivered as he sat up, hugging his arms to his chest, his tattered uniform soggy under that pressure. He felt as if he would never be warm again. Then he moved sluggishly to the pit where they had kindled their handful of fire the night before. He realized that the wolverines were missing. "Toggy?" His voice sounded rusty in his own ears, as if some of the moisture thick in the air about them had affected his vocal cords. "Hunting." Thorvald's answer was clipped. He was gathering a handful of sticks from the back of their lean-to, where the protection of their own bodies had kept that kindling dry. Shann snapped a length between his hands, dropped it into the pit. When they did coax a blaze into being, they stripped, wringing out their clothing, propping it piece by steaming piece on sticks by the warmth of the flames. The moist air bit at their bodies, and they moved briskly, striving to keep warm by exercise. Still the fog curled, undisturbed by any shaft of sun. "Did you dream?" Thorvald asked abruptly. "Yes." Shann did not elaborate. Disturbing as his dream had been, the feeling that it was not to be shared was also strong, as strong as some order. "And so did I," Thorvald said bleakly. "You saw your skull mountain?" "I was climbing it when you awoke me," Shann returned unwillingly. "And I was going through my green veil when Toggy took off and awakened me." "You're sure your skull exists?" "Yes." "And so am I that the cavern of the veil is somewhere on this world. But why?" Thorvald stood up, the firelight marking plainly the lines between his tanned arms, his brown face and throat, and the paleness of his lean body. "Why do we dream these particular dreams?" Shann, testing the dryness of a shirt, he had no reason to try and explain the wherefore of those dreams. Only was he certain that he would sometime, somewhere, find that skull, and then when he did, he would climb to the doorway of the snout, pass behind to depths where the flying things might nest, not because he wanted to make such an expedition, but because he must. He drew his hands across his ribs, where pressure still brought an aching reminder of the crushing force of the energy whip the Throgs had yielded. There was no extra flesh on his body, yet muscle slid easily under the skin. A darker skin than Thorvald's, deepening to a warm brown where it had been weathered. His hair, unclipped now for a month, was beginning to curl about his head in tight dark rings. Since he had always been the youngest, or the smallest, or the weakest in the world of the dumps, of the service, of the team, Shann had very little personal vanity. He did possess a different type of pride, born of his own stubborn achievement in winning out over a long roster of discouragements, failures, and adverse odds. "Why do we dream?" he repeated Thorvald's question. "No answer, sir." He gave the traditional reply of the service recruit. And a little to his surprise, Thorvald laughed with a tinge of real amusement. "Where do you come from, Lantee?" he asked, as if he were honestly interested. "Tyre?" Cauldron Mines, the survey officer automatically matched planet to product. "How did you come into survey?" Shann drew on his shirt. "Signed on as casual labor," he returned with a spark of defiance. Thorvald had joined the service the right way as a cadet, then a team man, finally an officer, climbing that nice even ladder with every rung ready for him when he was prepared to mount it. What did his kind know about the labor barracks where the dull-minded, the failures, the petty criminals on the run, lived hard under a secret social system of their own? It had taken every bit of physical endurance and energy, every fraction of stubborn will Shann could summon, for him to survive his first 3 months in those barracks, unbroken and still eager to be surveyed. He could still wonder at the unbelievable chance which had rescued him from that merely because training center had needed another odd hand to clean cages and feed troughs for the experimental animals. And from the center He made a team because when working in a smaller group, his push and attention to duty had been noticed and had paid off. 3 years it had taken, but he had made team structure. Not that that meant anything now. Shann pulled his boots on over the legs of rough, dried overalls and glanced up to find Thorvald watching him with a new, questioning directness the younger man could not understand. Shann sealed his blouse and stood up, knowing the bite of hunger, dull but persistent. It was a feeling he had had so many times in the past that now he hardly gave it a second thought. Supplies? He brought the subject back to the present and the practical. What did it matter why or how one Shann Lantee had come to Warlock in the first place? What we have left of the concentrates we had better keep for emergencies. Thorvald made no move to open the very shrunken bag he had brought from the scout ship. He walked over to a rocky outcrop and tugged loose a yellowish tuft of plant, neither moss nor fungi, but sharing attributes of both. Shann recognized it without enthusiasm as one of the varieties of native produce which could be safely digested by Terran stomachs. The stuff was almost tasteless and possessed a rather unpleasant odor. Consumed in bulk, it would satisfy hunger for a time. Shann hoped that with the wolverines to aid, they would go back to hunting soon. However, Thorvald showed no desire to head inland where they might expect to locate game. He disagreed with Shann's suggestion for tracking Taggy and Togi when those two emerged from the underbrush, obviously well fed and contented after their early morning activity. When Shann protested with some heat, the other countered. "Didn't you ever hear of feasts, Lantee? After a storm such as last night's, we ought to discover good pickings along the shore." But Shann was also sure that it was not only the thought of food which drew Thorvald back to the sea. They crawled back through the bolt hole. The beach of gravel sand had vanished save for a narrow ribbon of land just at the foot of the cliffs, where the water curled in white lace about the barrier of boulders. There was no change in the dullness of the sky. No sun broke through the thick lid of clouds, and the green of the sea was ashen to gray, which matched that overcast until one could strain one's eyes trying to find the horizon, unable to mark the dividing line here between air and water. Utgard was a broken necklace, the outermost island beads lost, the inner ones more isolated by the rise in water, more forbidding. Shann let out a startled hiss of breath. The top of a nearby rock detached itself, drew up into a hunched thing of armor-plated scales and heavy, wide-jawed head. A tail cracked into the air. A double tail split into equal forks for halfway down its length. A leg lifted as a forefoot, webbed, clawed for a new hold. This sea beast was the most formidable native thing he had sighted on Warlock, approaching in its ugliness the hound of the Throgs. Breathing in labored gusts, the thing slapped its tail down on the stones with a limpness which suggested that the rising of that appendage had overtaxed its limited supply of strength. The head sank forward, resting across one of the four limbs. Then Shann sighted the fearsome wound in the side just before one of the larger hind legs. A ragged hole through which pumped with every one of those breaths a dark purplish stream, licked away by the waves as it trickled slickly down the rock. "What is that?" Thorvald shook his head. "Not on our records," he replied absently, studying the dying creature with avid attention. "Must have been driven in by the storm. This proves there is more in the sea than we knew." Again the forked tail lifted and fell. The head raised from the forelimb, stretching up and back until the white underfolds of the throat were exposed as the snout pointed almost vertically to the sky. The jaws opened, and from between them came a moaning whistle, a complaint which was drowned out by the wash of the waves. Then, as if that was the last effort, the webbed, clawed feet relaxed their grip of the rock and the scaled body slid sideways,